trust as a skill is not trust as a value. So anyone who says, trust me, or we do quality work, those are the two number one places or you're getting the best deal. Like that immediately gets me not to trust.
Yeah.
So trust is the fastest way to get people to understand the concept of it's not all about you. There's a math to it, which is all your credentials and your reliability and your ability to know your client gets divided by how often you show up in the room to prove how smart you are.
Welcome to Leadership Disrupted. This is a very special episode that we're recording today because I'm here with Scott Armstrong. And Scott is here with me because while he is the CEO of a marketing services firm, BrainRider, and it's a lovely firm, they do great work. I've heard good things about them. I've seen some of their work, all good. That's not really why Scott is here today. I was really impressed. I was captured by Scott's online writings. He's got a book coming out this fall called Asshole to Ally. I really want to hear the story behind the title. And I think that what you will experience in the next 60 minutes or so is a point of view regarding leadership that is so much in line with what we see happening in the world today. As those of you who are regular listeners to Leadership Disrupted, we acknowledge that it's almost a perfect storm of disruptions that are hitting our world. Cognitive overload, information overwhelm, misinformation overwhelm, political trauma, social discord. You have intergenerational conflicts. You have intercultural conflicts. You have all kinds of reasons why people are less and less engaged in the workplace. And I just read a report earlier this week, and the essence of the report was that the decades-long decline of employee engagement has now suddenly been followed by a new decline in manager engagement. We've been watching employee engagement drift downward year by year by year by year for over 25 years. In this last year, manager engagement, as measured by a Gallup survey, was down over 4% year over year. And I think what's happening is all of these factors that have been impacting employees, they're now making their way to managers as well. And when your managers start to disengage, it just accelerates even further. Now, you may think that your employees are perfectly fine because they're showing up for work. What we know is that your most talented employees are able to show up. They're able to give what appears to be their all, appears to be 100%. But what's actually happening is they're checking 50% of themselves at the door or some other percentage. They're not fully showing up. You are losing them. You are paying them 100%, and you're really only getting a portion of their real potential. And so I want to welcome today Scott Armstrong, who's going to share with us his point of view regarding the problem, the challenges, what to do about it. And I'm just really excited, Scott. Welcome. I'm excited to hear your point of view. I would say maybe we should start with you maybe fleshing out the Scott Armstrong story, how you got to where you are today. And while you are, I will call you Canadian adjacent. You are Canadian, and but right now you are residing in the U.S. And so let's hear about that as well. And let's just start. Tell us about you, Scott.
Well, thanks for having me on your show, Dan. I think the question of leadership is the question of our time. And I agree with you that we're in a perfect storm. I wake up every day a little mystified, and I'm learning constantly on how to adapt and how to lead in these circumstances for me, for our team, and helping our clients. But if I go back on the who I am, I'm essentially a small town kid who I actually had a great childhood in that my parents were really engaging at the dinner table, asking lots of questions, interested in what I was doing, in my opinion, and really listening to all of the answers that I was giving. So I grew up as a kid that was curious and into the question. And then I did well in school. I did well in college. I became an ad guy. I really did well in advertising. And somehow I turned from that kid who was curious and constantly learning into the guy who thought he had all the answers.
Which happens to most of us in our 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a natural, and hopefully by our mid 30s, we start to recognize, oh, maybe I'm not all that. But
it's hard to recognize when you're winning, right?
Yeah.
Nobody really hands out marks for better questions. They cheer you on when you put your hand up first and charge to the answer.
Mm-hmm.
You, in the ad business, you really prepare to pitch your client on your ideas, to sell them on the ideas, particularly then. And I was working in Chicago for Y&R Advertising, and I was hired to win Miller Brewing, which in the ad business was a great assignment and one that was right up my alley. But it was high stakes. And I was waiting on a meeting getting booked by my President Carey's assistant, and she blew the booking, which might have put us out of the running.
Mm-hmm.
And so I blew up at her assistant. I just lost it in public in front of everyone else and told her how she had ruined everything for me. And my self-orientation was like showing through in spades. You're right. I was in my 30s and I didn't know any better. But I loved Carrie to death. I was just talking to her a couple of weeks ago because she hauled me into her office the next day. And she gave me the first half of the title of my book. She said, "You're acting like an asshole and no one's going to want to work with you. Clients aren't going to want to work with you. Teams aren't going to want to work with you. And my assistant isn't going to try to help you again. And all the other assistants know what you did to her yesterday." And for a kid who thought he was a nice guy, who thought he was a team player, it was just a break with reality to have her call me an asshole like that.
And when you are at that place in your life, you've been in a bit of a bubble because you are performing, you're achieving results, things are working, and you may not realize as you become a little bit of an asshole, like a mini asshole, and then a little medium sized, in the bubble that's represented by a lack of human feedback, where people aren't calling you on your little rudenesses, your little edge, your little abrasions. What a great gift that she eventually gave you to take you aside and say, here's your dose of reality. I'm going to cut through that bubble. This is what I'm actually seeing in you.
It was such a generous gift. And lots of leaders, don't take the time or the care to really haul you in like that, because it wasn't a fun conversation for anyone. And it took longer to really land than it should. I was winning, as you said, and lots of professionals in their 30s, your career is really taking off. I got the office, I got the title, I had the money, and I was not nearly as good yet as I thought I was. And so lots of ambitious professionals mid-career sort of hit a plateau. My plateau turned into a canyon. I lost my job. I was unemployed for a year. As when I went into every recruiting meeting and every interview trying to tell them how good I was. And so Carrie's words were echoing in my head over the course of that year. And that's where I started the journey of learning a little bit more about who I wanted to be, what kind of leader I wanted, remembering the kid and the person that I was at heart, and really discovering how powerful listening and trying to understand and trying to help clients and ultimately earning trust with clients was going to be.
I don't want to derail this, but I'm reacting viscerally to what you're saying because I can go back to my mid 30s, and there was a particular environment in which I was so hot. I was the best they'd ever seen or experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember now how full of myself I was. And I was shocked when I came up for a promotion that I was applying for, and they didn't pick me. And I could not believe how stupid they were to not pick me for that promotion. I was about to do exactly what you would expect. I was going to say, fine, fine, fine. You don't want me? I'm going somewhere else. And the smartest thing my boss did was he said, we think you could use some executive coaching, which I reject. I did not agree with. I thought, well, what would you want them to coach me to? And he said, but rather than pick someone for you, we'd like to give you some budget dollars. They actually, I mean, he knew me so well. When I think now back to the mastery of this, he just said, if you want to find your own coach, here's a budget that should get you about 6 months of coaching at any reasonable rate. And so I did. I mean, it's money that's going to be wasted if I don't. And that coach changed the path because he spent about 2 months getting to know me. And then I remember the moment where I remember the asshole moment. He didn't call me an asshole, but he had his own way of essentially saying, buddy, here's what I'm seeing. And it's not pretty. And if you want to continue this ride upwards, you're going to need to re-engineer who Dan Rust is, how Dan Rust is showing up, because right now it's all about Dan Rust. And yes, he said, yes, you are bright, you're articulate, you're good at this. Yeah, you are all of that. But there comes a point where leadership, if you really want to move up in an organization, isn't about you. It's about you helping others grow, helping others evolve. And here's a clue. You're not creating little mini Dans. You're helping them be the best version of themselves. And so long story short, it was very helpful. And I think I love the idea of you and I sharing this on a podcast like this, because there may be other men and women in a similar place in their lives where maybe part of what they need is that moment of self-reflection, that moment to say, okay, yeah, if it's not all about me, then how can I make it about something else and something more and something deeper? So where did that lead you as you had that experience? Where did that lead you?
Well, first, what a gift to get that coaching and to get that realization, because seeing how strong your self-orientation is almost impossible as a human.
Yeah.
And it's really hard when you're smart and credentialed and capable with the suit and the office and the weight of the firm behind you. What do you remember what specifically he did to get you not only to listen to him, but to really hear him say,
well,
it's all about you?
I do remember. And when I recount this to you, the more I think about it, the more I see how much mastery there was, because I've always considered myself to have a really great sense of humor, to be like, I'm a pretty edgy, funny guy. I believe. And he, after about 2 months, he had done some 360 feedback interviews with a lot of the people that I work with. Hadn't shared with me the results of it. He was just getting to know me through a lot of different perspectives. And as I kind of relaxed with him, he said to me one day, he said, something has really shifted in our relationship because you've relaxed with me and I feel like I'm getting the real Dan Rust now. Yep. And he said, you're a funny guy. He said, and he said, your best humor is kind of self-deprecating. You make fun of yourself. It's really comfortable having a conversation with you. And then he said, but I got to tell you, nobody at work feels that way. Nobody gets this Dan Rust. They don't get the funny Dan Rust who makes fun of himself. They get the edgy, kind of cynical humor, Dan Rust. And so he started with, what I perceived as my core strength, or one of my core strengths, and it was masterfully done. So then we began to talk about how that Dan Rust can show up more frequently in the office.
Right.
And I remember going home and telling my wife about the experience. And initially I was pushing back a little bit. And she said, do you remember when we were first dating? She said, you were not easy to date. You were not, you did not. She said it took a long time before you really loosened up and lightened up and became a little more human. And this is probably oversharing, but I asked her, well, why would you even go out with me then? And she said, well, I like French restaurants. And and she said you were paying. So there was that. So it did all sync up to help me start to look at me. And I would say that's that core truth. Everything else sprang from that core truth. But that is, you said it, that is hard. That is hard to take a real, genuine, painful look at yourself and say, okay, how do I grow to the next version of me beyond wherever I am right now?
And that's because it's all of that success. So being smart and ambitious and well-schooled and empowered got you there. It gave you the confidence to walk into your first presentation, work with your first client, make your first recommendation. And the challenge is it becomes an artificial ceiling for professionals. That they lean into that skill set when they're juniors, and it's not the skill set that makes rainmakers. It's not the skill set that leads to firm leaders. It's not the skill set that builds enough senior level trust to grow the business. And so it happened at BrainRider, and it happens with the clients that I do the trust consulting with. They've got an amazing team of ambitious professionals that they would like to get to the next level. And the first thing we do in the workshop is an exercise just to get them to see how well-intentioned, but how self-oriented their approach is in practice.
Tell us a little bit more about the workshop. And I also want to recognize I'm seeing a little bit of your methodology. You are great at asking questions. You are great at, it's almost invisible because it just flows in the conversation. And I had this moment where I recognized, oh, he has sucked me in. He has asked a really good question in the right way at the right time. And now I really like him because he's interested in me.
That's an element of trust for sure. But you also have this amazing story that really does notch in to the way that I think about leadership and I think about trust. And my best client relationships are really that. They're relationships where we do like working with each other. We do like solving client problems. My business partner, Nolan, so I am terrible at listening and asking questions. It's taken 20 years of business partner therapy to get me here. Right? That's the journey to being an ally. It's not short. I met him.
It's so weird. I mean, because I am not going to share my experience, but I'm feeling it. I have the exact same problem. I want to tell. I don't want to ask. I want you to hear me. I don't want to peel the layers away to understand you more deeply. What I will say, once you learn those skills, man, it opens up a whole new world.
That's right. You're a little hard on yourself in all the podcasts of yours that I've listened to. You hold a very high standard for your own performance, but that's what you need to do to be good at it.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be a critic and self-critical. The smart people that I work with, once they see it, they get it. It's a real moment in the workshop.
Mhm.
Usually I'll ask them about a professional in their life. Often it's a doctor or a medical specialist, and I'll ask who likes their doctor and why, and who doesn't like their doctor and why. And Dan, how about yours? Why don't you share a little bit about somebody?
Okay.
Doesn't have to be your doctor, but somebody in your life
I'm
who's a
gonna
professional.
I'm gonna work hard to be succinct, because one of the things I am working on is as you know, when I get passionate, I can verbalize forever. So here is what I like about my current doctor. He gives me time. I do
Mhm.
not feel rushed. He asks not just good questions, but he asks follow-up questions. It is not just, how are you doing? Are you having any issues? But then he peels the layers away to really understand. And but I would say it does come down to genuine interest in me. It's not just, okay, step in, the clock is ticking.
Right.
It's the US. It's not Canadian. Now I don't actually have experience with Canadian healthcare, but I've heard that there are experiential differences. And so what's typical in the US is this doctor has maybe 12 minutes allotted for me. So he's got to get in, ask some questions, get it recorded, prescribe something, and then get out. But my doctor is not that. And I don't get that feeling at all.
There are so few cross-border differences between people north of the border and people south of the border. We are all the same culture, and smart people and professionals, I guarantee you, act the same way
Uh-huh.
on either side and really worldwide. And you have an amazing doctor for all the reason they give you the time and they are truly curious. Most people, they have that 12-minute experience where they feel like they were not heard, we're not even diagnosed, we're sort of pushed a pill and kicked out of the office. And so when I bring that up in the workshop, somebody will give that. Someone will say, this is why I like my doctor. And someone will say, this is why I don't like my doctor. And I will point out the differences. One of them takes the time to earn trust in the conversation and how they're doing it. And then I get a role play. Then I change the subject. Secretly, it's still the same subject.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a role play, someone with their client and someone as the advisor. And I role play that in front of the audience. And I say, okay, advisor, go ahead. Let's do some discovery with this client. And so they'll ask a good discovery question because they're all smart. They'll ask a great second discovery question because they've done it a lot. Everyone in the room will be nodding. They'll ask on the third question, well, this is what I see and how I can help.
Ooh, so pretty
I
quickly
point out,
getting to diagnosis and recommendation.
did you see how quickly we moved to about what I can do for you? There's no way on two questions in a sophisticated business like yours, we understand the problem. And did you see on that third answer question series how eager the advisor was to jump in? They were listening. Now it's artificial a little bit because it's a role play and role plays are artificial.
Sure.
But they were listening to show the audience how smart they could be on their third question. I call that listening to reload.
And I'm getting that. In fact, if you have that habit, almost from the very beginning, even with your first question, you're not really asking because you're
Right.
like you're itching to get to that third. So and on some instinctive level, we feel that we get that. Oh, this is just, we're in a cattle chute, and you're just moving me down the process until we get to the end of the cattle chute. Whereas a really good journalist will start with an open-ended question, and they'll have a sense of where this is going to go, but they're going to open up almost. They'll take like the branch of a conversation, almost like peeling the leaves off of that branch. They're going to listen carefully and take that to its natural conclusion, and maybe what makes a journalist different is they're looking for a good story. They don't just want to seek a solution. They're looking for the details of a good story. But I think we could all learn a lot from that approach to asking questions.
Especially if you're working with clients that you work with over a period of years and a number of different problems, and the problems are complicated to diagnose and complicated to fix and really tough to implement. That uses up so much trust along that journey that you gotta build it over time, conversation by conversation in your approach. And in the workshop, so the workshop really does 4 simple things, because training is hard. It usually doesn't work all that well. I've heard you say that often in your podcasts. I've been in lots of training that hasn't shown up.
It's ironic, but yes.
And so I keep it pretty simple on, one insight. Wow, I'm a lot more about me than I realize when I work with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 skills. The first one is spend more time asking than answering. And the easiest way to do that is to remember answering is hard work. I'm going to need, if it's a good question, I'm going to need time to think through my answer. And almost always with a client, once they give you the first answer, there's still something lingering in their head that's the real answer.
Yeah.
And if I like using or coaching awkward silences in client conversations, because it's not coffee at your grandma's house where it's awkward. You're really giving a smart person time to think and answer your question fully. And so once you ask a question, then I just say, count to 5, or if you're really brave, count to 7, and they'll give you a better second answer.
Yeah.
4, 5. They're going to want to jump in and fill the gap with more smart information, because that's what smart people do. The second skill is, we talked about it a little bit, it's listening to learn. Like if you're in a knowledge business, if you're a consultant or an accountant or a lawyer, you're an ad guy, if you're a banker and even an investment banker, there's lots that you need to learn in the discovery phase and even in the operation phase of what you're doing. So you can't already have the answer in your head, or else you won't learn new stuff.
And most of us are smart enough that if we want to lead the conversation in a particular direction, we'll do that. And so then the other party doesn't really feel heard, because
that's right.
I mean, it almost is like eating some food that has very little nutrition. So you have the dining experience, but you don't feel fulfilled. Neither you or the other party feels really fulfilled, as opposed to taking the time to really know them and help them feel known. I forget who said this to me. This is years ago. He said, you may actually start a conversation knowing whatever the answer is. It might be rare, but it can happen. But if the client doesn't feel known, it doesn't really matter. And so you might be able to come out the gate with the perfect pitch, the perfect idea, the perfect proposal, the perfect whatever, the perfect diagnosis. But if the process feels like a pitch, the client doesn't feel anything from that, as opposed to taking the time to truly know them. And then when you get to your thought, your idea, your pitch, your whatever, they're going to feel like, okay, you do see me. You do understand me. And it's also much safer for you, the pitcher or the deliverer, because you'll figure out along the way, oh yeah, what I had in mind, it is right. It was right. But it's an amazing number of times where you go through this and then you realize, oh yeah, I had a pretty good idea, but now it's fine-tuned. Now it's targeted toward whatever.
So many times that happens.
How did it feel to you because you took these skills, this mindset, applied it in your own business, but then then you decided to make it, I'm going to call it a business, to make it like your new thing. So like you said, BrainRider is going well. It's perfectly fine, but it's clear where your passion is.
Right.
And it's partly clear because of your hat, because you don't have a BrainRider hat, you have a trust hat. When did you decide this was going to be your new thing?
Yeah, that's a really deep question, because BrainRider's been an amazing 17-year adventure with a business partner that I really appreciate. And I learned lots from him about questions, and he learned lots from me about relationships. He's really coached me into my role at the firm is coaching our team on these skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was getting up every day. You know, it's amazing the number of times your team comes back to you and says, I think we had a really great meeting, but nothing has moved forward. The client has gone radio silent, or they've provided some loose excuses, or they said that it's in consideration. They'll get back to us next quarter or by the end of the year, or maybe we don't even have budget for it this year. And coaching people to understand that they really didn't have as good a meeting as they thought. And there's a third skill I coach, which you just talked about out loud, which I call trust framing, which is at the end of any meaty conversation with one of your clients, instead of saying, okay, this is the problem and this is the answer, be more vulnerable as a professional and say, this is what I think I hear you saying. These are the challenges and these are some of the solutions that I can see, but I'm sure I'm not quite right yet because you're smart and you know your business. Help me frame this up together so we can move forward together. And I guarantee you, if you do that, you are more likely to get into a next conversation with your client, because they'll start using your words and want you beside them to try to explain it. And when I started having that success with our team internally, I started getting frustrated with the professionals that we were dealing with. We had an accounting firm. They were a global firm. They were really smart people who worked really hard, but they just I never felt like they were listening to where I was coming from or understanding what my real problem was. Financial accounting is a complicated subject. It was not my best mark on my GPA. And yet money between two partners who own a firm 50-50 is one of the most important conversations you need to get right.
Yeah.
And when your accountants come into the mix and start using terms that neither partner understands and starts panicking each partner and eroding a little trust that you've spent years to build up, you realize, they don't get that the conversation today is not the financial statements. It's trust between partners. Thankfully, we trust each other. We adore each other. But most partnerships don't. Most partnerships are already frustrated by it. So I decided that I could go try to coach that more broadly. I sat down and I took a draft of a book that I'd written a few years ago that was mostly red ink, and I tried again. And in writing that book, I really understood, I have had an adventure as an asshole. Lots of stories where I got it wrong. Lots of stories where I really could have done better. And that no one should have to go through getting fired, being called out, losing their job, getting divorced, having everything go wrong, just because they haven't seen that they have so much more potential than just self-orientation. And so that book, it was such a hard, illustrative, but really wonderful process of writing it. And then as I was circulating it for comment, people who I had previously coached at BrainRider and clients that I'd worked with and friends all said, you need to go and do this on stage and you need to go do this on workshops because it's your happy place.
Do you remember the first time you did that separate from your own business, separate from BrainRider, where you, and I imagine, I don't know for sure, but I imagine like, no matter how self-confident you are, the first time you like go out into the world with this new version of Scott Armstrong, this new messaging, even though you've done these things internally, but now it's an external view. I am mad. Well, tell me what that was like. I don't want to imagine what it was like. Tell me.
You asked great questions because I thought your question was going to say, how good did it feel? But you asked the right question, which is, how scary is it? And the truth is, there's lots of great thinking and thinkers behind what I do. You know, the way that I do trust is not unique and it's not brain surgery. And the value that I bring to it are really the stories and the experience as a practitioner. I get how hard it is to see your self-orientation. I get how hard it is to listen and frame. And the fourth skill is I get how hard it is to react as an ally when things go wrong, which is what I call moments of trust. And so I had some confidence that there was really great thinking and science behind what I was doing. But I had no confidence that it was going to be useful for people outside of BrainRider, and even less confidence outside of the advertising and marketing industry. And so it was, I think, the moment that I started feeling a little cockier is when I was doing a workshop for the Titans of Finance, an investment bank, a bunch of merchant bankers, and they got it. And they walked out of the room a changed team. And I had brought Nolan into that session because I was so nervous about it. I was like, I might blow this. So I brought my BrainRider business partner in with me to sort of save me if I went into deep water. He didn't have to say a word because the core methodology is about smart, ambitious professionals becoming more powerful, more trusted partners for people. And so many people used it. So I'm still nervous. The book hasn't been released yet. I have my heart and soul and a lot of stories about failure in that book. And so most of the people who know me at this stage of my career only see the successes. It'll be very interesting to see how it's received. But I love adventure. It's my personal life is adventure. I take off this afternoon to ride a motorcycle to Boston for business meetings next week, just for the hell of it, all the way through the backwoods, right? And that kind of adventure renews me in my personal life, and that kind of adventure really has renewed me in my professional persona.
Do you have a pre-order link yet for your book?
If people go to winthequestion.com, I've got two things to offer them. It's a pre-order link that includes the first chapter on the condition they give me some feedback. And the second is I have a self-test. I call it the 90-second client skills test. And you can give it to your team. If you're brave enough, you can take it yourself to see where you sit between ally and asshole in the way that you interact with your clients. It's real fun. It's real instructive. None of this are right or wrong answers. It's really about perceiving where your strengths are and understanding where you've got weaknesses that you need to balance off in some other way, or you've got weaknesses that you can strengthen with a little bit more focus.
I will make sure we include a link to that site in the show notes. So if anyone wants to, they can just go to the show notes and click on the link. I had an interesting experience 3 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was talking to a leader who I respect, has built several businesses. And I was talking to him about these kinds of concepts that you and I are talking about, that between you and I, this is flowing so freely. It's like we're twin sons of different mothers. It was the opposite experience with him. as he and I were, it wasn't for the podcast, it was just a conversation. And I had known him years ago and we were catching up, and I was describing what I see in terms of the world. And he said, I don't buy it. He said, I don't want my leaders listening more. I need my leaders to be the strongest voice in the room. I need my leaders driving people, making things happen. And he went on and on. And I realized, okay, there is, for a certain generation of mostly men, mostly white, not all, but mostly, for whom what you and I are describing is a bit threatening. What you and I are describing is a loss of authority, a loss of that positional power, a loss of something that I don't think it's going to go away easily. Maybe it won't go away at all for some leaders. They will simply try to write out the last 10 years or whatever of their working life. Have you been just universally embraced? Because you're more likable than I am. So maybe for you, it'll just be totally universally embraced. Do you ever get any resistance?
Yeah, I definitely get resistance. The workshops usually start out with resistance because we do some pre-work and not everybody gets on board with the concept.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's a really good insight to think about it generationally. It's a lot harder to teach an old horse new tricks. And so I don't spend much time there. I listen to the old horses complaining about their team, that Gen and Y or the millennials are harder to coach, harder to manage, harder to help succeed. And then I jump in there and say, it's partially because they haven't been taught some of the skills that you've either learned or you've picked up through osmosis or reading along the way. Why don't we help them? And the magic is the insight about being a human is self-oriented. That's universal. And it's actually not that hard to see unless you're really a complete jerk. And so if they participate in the workshop, I'm graceful with them because they can see it in action with their team often. And the movement to become better isn't massive. You know, Steve, you talked about Microsoft. You know, I would have never worked for Steve Ballmer.
Right. I get exactly what you're saying. Yes.
Right. But he's not running Microsoft anymore. And for the very reason that Satish, it is the leader for this generation. Mm-hmm. And I think lots of leaders of my generation and your generation do recognize that it is a different world, not just technology change or political change, but that the next generations are becoming powerful and important within the mix. My mantra for our team is you're not leading unless you have followers. And so if you're not actually connecting with the people you're leading in such a way that they start doing what you want them to do, it's your leadership that's suspect, less the followers that are suspect, particularly if you're in a business that's full of bright young people who've done well in everything else they've done. So those are the moments that I use to help senior leaders see the difference, but it's not my focus. They've already made their money. I want to help this Scott Armstrong 30 years ago shorten the distance between smart and success.
I'm so tracking with you. I do think one of the challenges of the approach you're describing comes down to time, because the world we are living in right now, the pace is faster. If we let it, I'm not saying you can't consciously deal with this, but there is more going on. Business is more complicated. Business is faster. Every new tool, starting back with mobile phones and email and now with AI, every new tool that allows you to get more done, it allows everyone else to get more done too. So it's not like you have a competitive advantage just because you're leveraging Claude or whatever technology tool, because everyone else is doing it. So it just speeds everything up. We're communicating more, we're pushing more out, we're doing more. I had a sales rep say to me, he was thrilled because now he could reach out to more prospects. He had used Claude Workspace, and he had built out this whole system where he was now reaching out to all of his clients and past clients on a weekly basis, sending out lengthy newsletters to them, because Claude also allowed him to write these lengthy newsletters. And he was all excited about this. And I said, can you imagine what it's like if you're one of those clients and maybe there are a dozen other versions of you shooting out newsletters, shooting out emails, more, ping, 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 ping. And I said, I think we're going to enter a world where suddenly the person who can convert a newsletter into a sentence is going to be valued, or a haiku, or in some other way, take the insight and deliver it more with less. That's going to be the insightful skill of the future. And it's not going to be as simple as asking Claude, hey, take this report and synthesize it into 2 sentences. That's going to be a human insight that we're going to have to bring. But back to time, asking questions takes time. Just being human with someone else takes time. Going out to lunch with someone and not just reviewing their KPIs or OKRs or where they're behind, but actually having a human lunch with another human. All of those things take time. And I think the younger generations of employees yearn for that. They yearn to be known. They yearn to be seen. They yearn for someone to just take a moment and say, I get you. And that mistake that you made, let's talk our way through it. Because when I say that may be a gift, that's not just a Hallmark card. It's not just something stamped on a meme. You and I know what it means to have made a huge mistake in your life and feel incredibly shamed by it and not want to share it with anybody. And then 2 decades goes by and you realize, oh, wait a minute, that was huge for me. And now I want to share it with the world. Now I want to tell the world, because I have a 27-year-old son who's had his fair number of mistakes and shameful moments, and I've had to help him see. I know it doesn't feel that way in the moment. I know it doesn't. I know how you just die. You die on the inside when you think of how embarrassing it was to do that thing in that meeting or whatever. But you will look back on this and it will make you a better person and more effective. So my question, and I want to be respectful of your time, Scott, but I have a couple of more layers that I'd like to peel away. When it comes to time, do you have any insights to help leaders maybe take a breath and realize their people need time? Their people need their time. Your people do need you, and it's you maybe be strategically slower sometimes. I don't know. Does that prompt any thoughts?
Oh, so much. Yeah. My first reaction is always that, time is really directly connected to prioritization. And so you take time in areas that feel important or that you think are important to the business. And so you have to recognize where you're winning, where you're creating success, either for yourself or your company or your team, or in our case, for our clients. And that's where you want to invest the time. And in the way you're using time, it's really allowing time for more discussion and conversation and learning. And what I would say about that is, AI is a perfect technology case study, but technology as a whole which is AI is really providing amazing answers. They're not perfect. They need to be improved, but they take a lot of the time and grunt work out of doing answers and executing. And in marketing and advertising, that's changing. In law, that's changing. In accounting, that's changing. In finance, that's changing. That analysis work that used to prove that you were smart is now table stakes.
Yeah.
Anybody can bring that in. And McKinsey did a great study, showing that AI helps low performers look like mid performers, but it doesn't do as good a job of helping mid performers become top performers. And I think the difference is another study which talked about the proposals that go through have an advocate that talks 43% of the time or less.
Mm-hmm.
And proposals that stall have an advocate who talks 65% of the time or more. Because it takes time on both sides of the conversation for that really to work, whether it's your internal team, which is often where you're focused, or whether it's your external partners and teams and clients, which is where I'm focused. The building trust, I think, and I wrote a postscript in the book about this very subject, which is AI is now making human trust the competitive advantage. Smartness, speed, and effort are table stakes. I'm not saying you don't need them, and you should be adopting AI in the work that you're doing, but you should be investing time in the areas that build trust and build relationship, because that's what's going to differentiate you from other leaders, other companies, or in my case, other advisors.
And if you're an organization that has an AI strategy, I think it's very important to recognize that your employees are watching. They're watching to see how are you as an organization processing this new set of tools. And if you process it with efficiency in mind, they're going to know. They're going to see it. And no matter what words you use, they're going to see that your approach to AI is basically an efficiency approach, and that means elimination of jobs eventually.
Not only does it mean elimination of jobs, Dan, there is no long-term strategy in the world that grows and wins by cutting.
Yes, agreed.
And so these tools can allow you to do more. You need to organize to be able to do more of the right stuff.
And if your AI strategy is an augmentation strategy, where I'm going to, I talked to a group of interns a couple of months ago, and they were struggling because for the first time, a couple of them had been interns every summer for the same organization, and they said for the first time their entire internship was about AI. Basically, they'd been upskilled in use of AI and then had been asked to take on projects, and it was exactly what you just described. Low-level people being able to do the work of medium-level people, and it was very productive. But every one of them said, it's the most boring internship ever.
Right.
I'm just fingers. I'm just entering data. I'm producing marketing reports. I'm producing stuff that looks great, and it's very productive for the company, but I'm not growing. And I don't know, like next year, this was going to be their last year as interns. Now they were going to go into the real job market. They realized, well, this company isn't hiring. This company is going to bring in more interns to do more of this work. But where do I go? Where do I now for my first year, where do I go? Because all I've learned is how to process or how to prompt engineer. And that was not a great experience for them. And so their company, I think, hadn't really thought through what is the human experience of being asked to leverage AI in this way. Whereas, and I'm not saying I'm the model, I'm definitely not, but I have a team of creative people who are instructional designers, and they leverage AI very actively, but I always am looking for the human insight. Like, what did you add to this? What can we add to this? How can we make this more? How can this raise your game? So yes, you can do more faster, but let's also be more insightful. So that it's almost like having an interns, like having a group of really smart interns do the basic work for you. Now, how is that going to raise our game? And when we create externally facing documents, my quest is always, even if AI is augmenting the production of those, it should never feel like AI. It should never have that vibe of AI. And many of us can't exactly pick it out, but we know when we read something that has that AI vibe. It's a lot of content. It all kind of sounds intelligent if you're not really paying attention. But if you're really paying attention, oftentimes it's like white sugar. There's not much there. It's just either too perfect or too something. And so I will say to them sometimes, I don't know what it is exactly, but it feels like AI. It feels vibey, like AI. I want you to go and humanize this.
Right.
And sometimes humanizing means strategically adding imperfections. Maybe the grammar doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe you can go off on a little tangent, but do something. Humanize this, because right now it's just not working. And
maybe you use the word that your president used to describe you in 2002 in the title of your book, regardless of what Amazon says about mild profanity in the bookstore, because it was the real story. When I called her and I said, look, I'm telling this story about you, and you swear in it, in the story, and I put it on the title of my book. Are you okay with that? Carrie laughed out loud and said it would be exact. It was exact. I don't remember it word for word, but that's exactly how it would have happened. You know, there's a chapter on marketing professional services in my book, and I say the exact same thing that you just said, which is, if your proposal, you could swap out any other client's name in the delivery or any other provider's name in who wrote it, and have it sound the same, then you're table stakes.
Yeah, and if I will give you one more clue, if AI is generating for you a slide deck where their needs are summarized into 3 bullets, in a very neat, packeted way that's all correct, something's missing. Something. Yep. So you got to ask yourself, well, what did I see that someone else wouldn't see? What can I recommend that someone else wouldn't recommend? And if it doesn't come to you, then it's time to put more thought into it. And that's where AI can be the augment, not just a time saver.
But it's really, how am I showing up? Me, the person, the human, the brain that cares.
I've got a couple of colleagues who we all are very like-minded, but we are all a little hesitant to share with each other how we were leveraging AI, because I think there's a little bit of possible embarrassment. Like, do I really want to say how? But because each of us is looking at AI as to level ourselves up, like to go 1 or 2 notches up. Now it's actually a very free-flowing conversation. In fact, we were laughing with each other a couple of days ago because we had all used up our Fable credits. Like Claude had given everybody some credits,
50%,
the new level, and we all very excitedly used Fable credits. And one of us said, I said to myself, I should have saved that for some of the harder stuff. And we all nodded our heads, because Fable is supposed to be the ultimate processing right now. Who knows what it'll be in the future? But when you are using it in that way, you don't feel shame, you don't feel embarrassment. You feel like, okay, there's a tool. It's a set of tools.
It's a tool
that's going to raise my game. And then who knows what's next? I mean, AI is not going to be the end. Human evolution is going to continue, and so who knows what new tools, what new capabilities humans will be able to leverage to continue to augment and make themselves better and better. But if we don't, what I love about your approach is, I think if we don't do it thoughtfully, we may destroy ourselves. Because if it's just more, better, faster, you can only dance so fast. You can only talk so fast. And I think we've reached the end of human evolution in terms of our capacity to process those kinds of things.
The it's what's got me so excited about Win the Question and these workshops is that nobody really tries to teach trust as a human skill.
Yeah.
And it takes the insight that it's not just about me, which is a hard insight as we talked about it, but it takes also understanding just the value of some of those other skills. I was in Boston a couple months ago, and I heard an amazing lecture from an MIT engineering researcher talking about whether robots and AI can be deceitful, whether they lie. Very provocative title.
Mm-hmm.
But his first answer in the lecture was, yes, they actually do it all the time. That's not the problem. The problem is that a human is more likely to forgive the AI's deception than they are to forgive a human mistake. They'll blame it on the system as opposed to on the human relationship. And his mantra for the whole speech, I will never forget, which is, we trust these systems too much. And I'm on a mission to get us to build skills so we can trust each other more.
How do you avoid this feeling manipulative, feeling like, oh, well, you're saying follow these approach, ask questions, do all of these things, and it's a way of creating the illusion of trust, or the feeling of trust, without necessarily being worthy of trust. I mean, that would be truly manipulative. How do you avoid it feeling like that?
Yeah. Trust as a skill is not trust as a value. So anyone who says, trust me, or we do quality work, those are the two number one places that or you're getting the best deal. Like that immediately gets me not to trust.
Yeah.
So trust is the fastest way to get people to understand the concept of it's not all about you. There's a math to it, which is all your credentials and your reliability and your ability to know your client gets divided by how often you show up in the room to prove how smart you are. That's the real learning that they get in these workshops. And so long as I can explain to someone who's interested in advance that we're not selling snake oil that makes me more trustworthy, we're selling a process that leads to better client conversations, more deeper client relationships, and really creating more value on all sides, then trust just becomes the label for that.
And what I get from your writing is that you're all about helping people earn trust for which they are worthy, as opposed to perform trust in order to make a particular impression. And I happen to believe if someone is thinking, well, I'm going to learn to perform trust because it'll be a good sales technique, people are smarter than that. They instinctively get it. They get whatever's on the inside of you. And so the performative part of it, if it's just that, I don't. Now, with a few exceptions, and I know you know this, there are some among us who are so amazingly good at the performative part of it that they somehow suck people in. So that's why the world has con men and con women, and it does happen. But for most normal humans, it's not just performance. It is learning to earn trust for which you are worthy, and making sure that, in fact, that is trust that you have earned. Scott, this has been amazing, and I want to be respectful of your time. Like I said, we'll have the links so people can find you if they want more information. I know absolutely you and I are not going to be strangers.
I agree.
I feel like when there's a time in your life where your bike trip takes you through North Dakota, I'll send you a pin so you know exactly where to come, and you can come and spend some time on my 10 acres. And I think you'd have a great time.
I know I would have had a great time because I had an amazing conversation today. You know,
So
I
cool.
get lost in these conversations because they're about ideas and thoughts, and I'm always learning stuff. And in preparing for it, I got to listen to some of your other interviews and just your thinking and what you've published. And so it's really been a pleasure to not only see and hear the ideas, but get to know the person behind them, which is at heart part of trust too.
The feeling is so mutual. I do appreciate it. So thank you. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.